Did you know that the words that you choose and the way that you're communicating could be sending the wrong message? In the business world, we know that language not only reflects our thoughts, but also how others perceive us. And guess what? Even in 2024, career women are still using more passive words and phrases when compared to the men, which can then definitely weaken our position. So come back and join me for episode 57, and let's make sure that your language is as powerful as the career professional you are meant to be.
Are you a strong, independent woman who's passionate about her career? Then this podcast is perfect for you. Based on her book, The Career Woman's Secret Playbook, career coach Dr. Dawn Hamby shares the kind of insider secrets you can only know if you've hired, fired, and promoted employees over the past 30 years.
Ladies, I'm on a mission to help busy women just like you create a career and life you love without sacrificing your work-life balance to get it. Come join me as we inspire and motivate each other only as women can and have lots of fun along the way.
With Dr. Dawn's tools, strategies, and action steps, you can unleash your personal and professional power in a whole new way. Here's today's episode.
Welcome back, everyone, to episode 57 of the Career Woman's Secret Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Dawn, CEO and founder of Dr. Dawn Shop Talk. And as a business consultant and coach, I want to make sure that our podcast and our YouTube channel, in fact, if you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to give us that thumbs up. We would love it. But I want to make sure we are actually helping today's professionals build their brands, upskill their career, and definitely live their lives with a little more passion and purpose. If this sounds like you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button, rate, review, and share. And as a thank you for listening, I've got all kinds of free resources for you. I want you to check that out on our website at drdawnshoptalk.com. So let's get into it. Do you remember when I said in the intro how men and women differ in this area? Well, let's talk about the research. And the research says this: women consistently use passive language in much greater numbers. Phrases like I think or maybe or the word just. These are all examples of passive words and phrases. And when you use those consistently, guess what happens? You come across as unsure of yourself, and that uncertainty can definitely diminish our authority, our impact, and our credibility. And here's something else that's interesting about the research, ladies. Women also tend to soften their tone and their inflection at the end of sentences. So then what happens? You're trying to make a decisive point and it comes across as a question instead. Well, when that happens, you end up giving the impression that you need validation instead of making the decisive points that you were trying to make. Now, let me point this out. There is absolutely nothing wrong with asking a question. In fact, many of my female employees and definitely my female clients, they have struggled with asking questions and asking for help. If you don't, that's when mistakes get made. And that's also when you end up spreading yourself too thin and increasing your chances, unfortunately, for burnout. I definitely don't want that to happen to you. So again, nothing wrong with asking questions and asking for that help. You just want to make sure that when you are trying to make a point, that your inflection sounds confident. You don't want that inflection at the end of a sentence. So again, it sounds like you're constantly asking for a question to be answered, as if you're unsure about your opinion or your recommendation. The issue really is, are you making this the rule or the exception? Because if you're consistently doing these things, especially when you're in a leadership role, or let's say you're not in a leadership role, but you're attending an important meeting and you're trying to make your best first impression, well, things like this might actually be standing in your way. And here's one last thing I want you to consider. If your male colleagues are using more assertive, powerful language and are ending their statements definitively, guess what? They're going to come across as the authority and they're going to come across as more competent than you, even though their message might have been identical to yours. So, sure, ultimately, there are a lot of things that are out of our control, right? There really are. We're not always going to be able to control how someone perceives us. We don't have to worry about that. Remember, you're responsible for the effort, not the outcome. Even when the outcome turns out to be something maybe you weren't expecting or wanting, there are so many examples from the world's top entrepreneurs and business folks out there that when the result's been different than what they wanted, sometimes it's actually been the best thing ever. It's made them pivot their business in a different way, or their career took a different path and it turned out just fine. Sometimes it actually ended up being better than they ever could have realized. So I don't want you to freak out about what you can and cannot control. Okay. We definitely have videos to help you on that. But I do want this podcast and this YouTube channel to be a place where you can come for tips that are going to help you both in your professional and in your personal life. So, as always, when we tackle a topic here on Dr. Dawn Shop Talk, what do? We're going to take a deep dive on the conversation. I definitely love your comments. Please continue to send those. Your feedback is so important, not only so that I can make sure that I'm answering any questions you may have, but you guys have given me some of the best ideas for future episodes. So continue to do that, you guys. I really appreciate it. But here's something else that if you're one of our loyal listeners out there, you know that we're going to talk about the topic, but then I'm always going to make sure that you walk away with some strategies you can put in place today. I don't want us to just discuss these things and then you walk away with nothing you can actually do about it. Okay. If you're listening to this, I've got you. I've got your back on this, and I'm always going to share at least three, four, five. Sometimes we've shared seven. I think we've even shared 10 tips before. We try not to make the podcast, too long, but I'm not going to make it 5 or 10 minutes either if I can help it, because I want to make sure that you have as much information, enough strategies and tools to really help you kind of consider some things, maybe look at things differently. And if we can help you again in any way, don't forget, check out our website. We've got all those free resources for you. We've got a book about this subject. We've got one-on-one coaching, and we can even come to your company and do workshops and seminars, all kinds of things that we're very passionate about because we love helping people. We really do. Okay. It's what it's all about. So let's get into it. Let's talk about 5 strategies that you can use right now to make sure that your language is really reflecting the amazing professional you are. All right. Number 1, I want you to eliminate weak language. Remember some of the words I talked about before, like maybe or just or I think? These words and phrases can actually weaken your statements. And you guys, I've done this myself. In fact, now that I think about it, I just said I think, I believe, and I'm going to make this statement. There you go. I know for a fact that I use the word just quite a bit. I really believe I'm using it for emphasis, but I'm now going to kind of go back through my text messages and emails because if I'm not using that word correctly, again, I might be weakening my own point of view. And who the heck needs that, right, ladies? Okay, so instead of saying words and phrases like that, here's something to think about. If your tendency is to say something like, well, I just want to add, fill in the blank, just get rid of the word just and I want to. Just simply say, I want to add, or you can say, my recommendation would be. See, those two alone definitely sound more decisive and confident. All right, tip number 2, I want you to use action oriented verbs. And I want to make sure you're picking strong, assertive ones. For example, replace I hope we can with either we need to or let's move forward with. I also like, and I mentioned this in the previous tip, I always like to say my recommendation would be, again, because by doing that alone, you're not only reinforcing your authority, but if you're saying something like, my recommendation would be, or based on my experience, I would suggest, Yes, suggest maybe is not as strong as we need to, but it's professional yet powerful. And when you say, based on my expertise or based on my experience, or I would recommend, it's also kind of reaffirming that you have a point of view to share. And it's not just your opinion, it's actually based on your past experience and that expertise. Tip number 3, I want you to practice your inflection. In other words, pay attention starting right now on how you're ending your sentences. If you're texting or emailing, that's not a problem. It's when you're actually having a conversation. Maybe you're on a Zoom call trying to make a point. Maybe you're in that important meeting with your boss. And, again, if you're ending those sentences as if you're asking for permission, then how is it not going to affect your credibility and your authority? In fact, speaking of your tone and your voice, did you know that there's some really fascinating research about how women, when they get older, I guess this will be, I'm going to put a positive spin on it. I have found this to be true for myself too. So, you guys, there are some benefits to getting a little older. Okay. Don't worry about the wrinkles and all of that. They've got beauty creams and all kinds of treatments for that if you're worried about it. Not that I think you should worry about it, but you get where I'm going. The research shows that as women get older and they build that confidence, guess what happens to their voice? Their voice was higher pitched when they were younger. Your voice is lowering, not necessarily because you're a little older. There may be a little bit of that, but the research shows that a woman, when she sounds or feels insecure, she sounds more high pitched, which then can make you sound shrill and definitely unsure of yourself. So think about that. There's some, again, interesting research. You'll even see that with some famous actresses. When they're younger, their voice is a little higher. And when they're older, it's a little bit lower. It definitely makes you sound more powerful. So really think about this, especially if you're on the phone or trying to come through, on a computer. Make sure your voice is not too high. If it's too high pitched, you sound young and inexperienced, and you don't sound like that powerful professional I know that you are. Moving on to tip number 4, I want you to be direct and concise. Guys, I promise you, this is really hard for me. I have shared before in other episodes that ever since I was a kid, I just would get so excited to share all kinds of things about my day, and I tend to be very detailed oriented. What's interesting is there are gender differences here between men and women. Women love expressing the details. Why? Because we tend in greater numbers here to notice the details. Now, I'm speaking in generalities. Are there exceptions to the rule? Well, absolutely. But if we can never speak in generalities, then we can never notice trends. We might not notice some gaps that need to be addressed. So, again, I'm speaking in generalities here so that you can see that there could be some gender bias, some gender differences that need to be addressed. And when it comes to language and speech, women in greater numbers notice the details and they love to give the details of every nuance. I think it personally makes them the best storytellers because, again, you'll get captivated. However, if the men are not perceiving it that way, they might lose that train of thought. They might lose the enthusiasm for what you're saying. And again, when I was talking about my family and when I was little, being so excited to share everything, you guys, it got so bad that I promise you this story is true. If you know me personally, you can check with my family. I had to be put on a timer at the kitchen table so that my sister Alexandra could actually get a word in. I always apologize to her on this podcast when this issue comes up. So again, I'm so sorry, Alexandra, but it did make me and my family convinced that public speaking should actually be something I would consider, for a profession. And of course, I do a lot of that now. So again, that was a natural fit for me. If the gender differences are rearing their ugly heads and you are speaking as a woman, as a professional woman, to a large group of men, I've seen it. I'm not just telling you that this is the research. I have had the privilege of supervising many men and women in my now 31 years in the workforce. And when I was speaking to the men, I did make my points more concise and more direct for two reasons. One, I understood that it did make me come across more as an authority if I didn't get lost in the weeds. And number two, it just keeps people on track. And then I don't know, they're just more excited, especially again, if it's predominantly men, that you got to the point they now understand how things need to be done, what you need for them, and they're ready to go. But if I'm speaking in front of a larger group of women, then I did give a little bit more of the detail, more of the story. And I could see on their faces that they appreciated that. So, ladies, I've talked about this before as well. Tap into the beautiful power of female friendships and explain every nuance to your friends. They will be your best audience. When I have told a story, I literally can look around the dinner table when I'm out to dinner with the girls and we have a GNO, a girls' night out, and I feel so appreciated. I see those smiles around the table. And I feel all the love and validation that you can get from that kind of audience. My husband, who is the sweetest, kindest person on the planet, I explain things to him. And if I give too much detail, even though he loves me and is my biggest cheerleader, I can see in his eyes, that he's getting a little lost. Not that he can't follow the story. It's just like he's waiting for me to get to the point. So, again, these are gender differences you can find in the research. If you're like me, you've experienced this firsthand. The last thing I want is for you not to come across as a powerful professional. So, you want to sound confident. And if your emails, if your text messages, if your phone calls or presentations, or just having a meeting is way too long, even though you think you're doing a great job because you're providing all the detail, again, it could really take away from your power. So, something to think about. Last but not least, this fifth tip is all about owning your opinion. Kind of similar with when we talked about inflection, where you're ending your sentences as a question instead of a declaration. This is similar, but with a twist. And what I mean by that is that when you give your opinion and then you follow it with saying, does this make sense? Or I hope that makes sense. Listen, I'm guilty of that too. If it's in my personal life, I may say that with more frequency, but in my professional life, I definitely practically have this whole question eliminated from my vocabulary. So instead of saying, does this make sense? As if I'm so difficult to understand or my opinion is just so out there, I instead will say, again, based on my experience, this is what I would recommend. Or I suggest this strategy. It's worked very well for my department. We've seen great results. Something like that is going to, again, make the point, make it clear. It's going to show that return on that investment because you're saying this is a strategy that's been very effective. And you're not sitting there kind of almost dumbing it down by asking if it makes sense. Let me tell you, if it doesn't make sense, if you've got folks in that room that are actually paying attention and not on their phone, right? Or on a Zoom call, if they're doing a million things and not paying attention, maybe that's the reason it doesn't make sense. And you're not responsible for that, ladies, right? Again, so something to think about. Now, here's a bonus tip to keep you on track, right? Because all of this sounds great, but man, isn't it easy to kind of slip back into old habits if we're not careful? So, here's what I want you to do. Try recording yourself, even perhaps using the voice memo on your phone if you've got nothing else available. But try recording yourself during a meeting or when you're making a presentation. Then listen back. Because again, you might think you're not using these kinds of words or phrases. You might think that your inflection is going down and that your voice doesn't sound like it's so high that you're sounding shrill or unsure. But then when you hear yourself back, you might be surprised. Now, if you're not surprised and you sound fabulous, then again, that's great. Okay, more confirmation that you're on the right track. But listening to yourself and going back through these 5 tips is really going to help solidify that you are on the right path to making sure that your communication style is serving you in the best way possible. It's not what you say, as they say. It's really how you say it. It really can make such an impact. It really is key. It's key in terms of being seen as the strong, capable professional you truly are. And as always, I want to leave you with our company motto that you know we say at the end of every episode. If you've been listening for a while, we say this at the end of every episode because it's a quick reminder of how much power we really do have in terms of our day, how things go. It's all about your mindset. It's all about your time management. It's all about the effort that you're putting in. All right, ladies. So, again, let's wrap up with the motto. And it goes like this: if you're not having a fantastic day, remember, you've got the power to make it one. Thanks, everyone. And don't forget to subscribe for more tips and strategies. And follow us on our socials. You'll get even more tips and strategies there. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Dr. Dawn Shop Talk. Till next time.
I know our episode is over, but this is just the beginning. If you're ready to take action but don't know where to start, just head over to drdawnshoptalk.com for lots of free resources, ways to work together, and for even more. Subscribe to the Dr. Dawn Shop Talk YouTube channel. Remember, ladies, you don't have to take this journey alone. I've got you covered. Till next time.